Margaret Loftin, March the 26th, 1931.
And where were you born?
Zillow, Washington.
And this interview is by Scott Davis, and it's part of the Cane Hill Oral History Project. And we just want to be sure that we have your permission to use this interview for educational purposes.
Yes, sir.
Who were your parents?
Macy and Faye Holden. Macy and Faye Cox Holden.
And where did they live?
They lived at Clyde, and then they moved to Washington and lived in Zillow, Washington for several years. I don't really know how many. They had 4 children there. And then they come back here in 1936 and moved on part of the Cox property at a mile south of Clyde.
So when did you first move to Cane Hill, or the Cane Hill area?
1936.
What are your earliest memories of the Cane Hill area?
I guess going to school.
So tell me, when did you go to school, and what do you remember about Cane Hill School?
Well, I went to school 11 and a half years at Cane Hill School. I went to Susanville, California for a half a year in the 5th grade. And the rest of the time I had Cane Hill. Pauline Irwin was my school teacher in the 1st through the 4th grade. When I come back from California, Marguerite Carnes was my teacher. And she quit, and Mr. Johnny Miller was my teacher the rest of the year. And he taught me in the 6th grade, and then moved on across the hall to the 7th grade. And we had 3 teachers there: Martha Elizabeth Moore, Mabel Melson, and Miss Skinner. And then from there on, we had 3 teachers all the time. We had different ones. Wanda Irwin was one of my teachers. She was my math teacher in 12th grade. Betty Cole was one of my teachers. Can't think who all my teachers were. Mary Benton from Clyde was one of my teachers. I thought we had a good school. I played on the basketball team, and we had a good basketball team. We always tried to beat Mara, of course. They wanted to beat us, and we wanted to beat them. I rode a bus to school and had different bus drivers. I never did have to ride on a pickup like some of them did. We usually had a bus. And I can remember crossing Flat Rock when the water come up in the bus. It was that high.
Where's Flat Rock?
Down by the mill where you turn to go to Roy Jean's. It made a curve right there in the corner and went up right beside the Yates property.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a big flat rock that you drove across.
What was it like going to school in Cane Hill? Tell some of the routines. What would y'all do in a typical day?
Well, we had several recesses, and we liked to play games and things, and they had different things for us when we wasn't in class, when we was in grade school, for us to work at. And they had pictures. They had, I don't remember what they call the thing. You put a slide in it and you put it up to your eyes and looked at the animals and things. And we all liked to go back to the table and do that. And we had coloring books and things that we were played at whenever we wasn't in class. Of course, there were several classes of us in each room. And when one class was having class, the others could do something else.
Who were some of your classmates and friends from school?
Joanne Yates and Verna Pitts and me started school together and finished school together. Mary Patrick was a good friend. Mary Lee Grant was a good friend. Louise Biggs was a good friend. I had a lot of good friends. We was nearly a girl class. Very few boys we ever had in our class.
Did the boys not go to school, or they just?
Well, I don't know. We just didn't have them in our class. At graduation, we had 2 that graduated, but they wasn't in our class. And I understood they didn't get their diplomas signed, but they did graduate with us.
Tell me about your family routines. What would be something you would do? What would y'all do on a Sunday?
Go to church.
Where would you go?
Clyde.
Clyde?
Yeah. And a lot of the time we walked.
Walk?
It was a mile walk.
And what would you do after church?
We'd go home, maybe something. We'd always have company go home with us nearly. And a lot of the time on Sunday, if it was in the summertime, we'd go to the creek, play in the water.
After church?
Yeah,
The kids or the whole family?
the kids mainly. Sometimes the parents would go along.
What did kids do for fun in those days outside of school? If you were at home on a weekend or something?
We made stilts, and we walked on them, and we had paddle boards. We'd take a tobacco can and nail it on a board and bend the sides up to run the wheels on. And we'd stomp oil cans and put our foot down in it, and they'd stick to our feet, and we'd walk on them.
So you found stuff to do for fun?
And that's what my grandmother's, she had a big hill, and it had a lot of grapevines on it, and we'd swing on those grapevines out over the barn, which I know wasn't very good.
What changes do you remember over the years in the Cane Hill community?
Oh, a lot. Yeah. Well, in the first place, so many people have changed. I don't know a whole lot of them, where I used to know everybody. Of course, the older ones have gone on, and the young ones have moved in from other places. But, well, we've lost our stores, and we lost the Clyde post office. We've lost so many things out of our community. The grocery stores.
Tell me about the grocery stores in Cane Hill.
Well, the first I remember, Shaker had a store across over in the old rock building by Mr. Russell's house. And he had feed and everything in there. And then he eventually built this building and moved over here. And then Ellis Jenkins come and bought it. And he had his store here. And then he converted the old bank building into the grocery store and moved over there.
What business was your family in? What was your family life like?
Well, when we lived in Washington, my daddy worked in the orchards. We lived in the fruit country. And then when we moved here, we had cows and raised some chickens. Daddy was one of the first ones that started growing broilers, a whole 500.
500?
And we kept the first one still. It was 23 weeks old. As Dominicers.
What year would that have been in?
Oh, back about 40. No, yeah, about 40. No, it wasn't in 40. It must have been in the 30s.
Who did you grow them for? Yourself or did you grow
Jeff Brown. But we had to sell our own chickens. They were buyers. But you had to call them and tell them you thought your chickens was ready to come out and look at them. And they'd come out and tell you what they could give for them.
So you didn't have a contract? You just...
No, not back then. You didn't have contracts.
Did they free range or did you feed
Oh no,
them
you had them in a pen and had a building.
Yeah. In houses like today?
Yeah, but nothing compared with a house today for 500. Yeah.
What about your food? How much of it did you buy and how much of it did you grow?
Most of it we growed. We killed hogs. Daddy always had a bunch of hogs fattening to kill. And we had our own milk and butter. And they growed most of our food. They'd go to town on Saturday and take the cream off and the eggs and get whatever they needed, maybe a sack of flour or a sack of meal. And at one time I remember Daddy brought feed up and had it ground and made the flour.
Here at the mill?
Uh-huh.
What do you remember about the mill?
I just can't remember much about it. I remember.
You know your dad used it?
Yeah. And I remember hearing my daddy tell about when he was a boy here, hauling stuff down there on a horse to have it ground.
What year would that have been in?
Oh, Daddy was born in 1899, so when he was a boy, it would have been early 1900s.
What was the last year you remember that mill operating?
Oh, I don't remember.
What did the adults do for fun in Cane Hill when you were, you know, a young adult and older?
They had clubs, ladies did. And of course, the men would come here to the store and play dominoes and pitch and stuff. And a lot of people would gather at the store and visit.
What would you talk about?
Oh, what they was doing, what their occupations was, and what they was working at.
Who are some of the people that you've gotten to know real well in Cane Hill area over the years? Some of your closest friends and neighbors?
Now or later or earlier?
Just over the years, it doesn't matter.
Well, I knew lots of the older people that was here, was good friends to them. Of course, Joanne was here in the store, and I was here a lot with her. We was best of friends. And I got acquainted with all the older ones and liked them all. Mamie and Newt Mills and Paul and Roxy Dismuke. Roxy Dismuke, she told us one time down here at the store, she said, I've got hens up there. She lived up by the big spring. And she said, I've got hens. And she said, nobody has never stolen any of my hens, and they never will. So that night, Joanne Yates and Mary Patrick and me decided we'd go get one of Roxy's hens. And we did. We got her around the neck where she couldn't squall. And we took her, Dorothy Pennell and Ernest lived where John lives up at Dwayne, I can't think of his last name. Yeah, where he lives. And we took that hen over there for her to help us cook, because we didn't any of us know how to cook her. And we took her over there, and that was the toughest old hen. She pressured and pressured that hen for us to eat. But Roxy never did know we got her hen.
Did you ever tell, never did tell her?
Oh, no. And we sure didn't tell our parents.
You got in big trouble.
Yes, we would.
So you just did it as a prank?
Yeah, we did, just because she said it couldn't be done.
That's funny.
And we played hooky different times.
From school?
Yeah. One time there was several of us, all out of all grades in high school. And we all gathered here at the store. And we took off, of course we was afoot. And we went over by where Jim Lytle lived, up at the Booth Camel place, back up that way to a big rock. And that the people was all talking about. And we was gone all day. And we come back out by Cold Springs. And when we got there, Miss Finley, our principal, was there waiting on us. And
Knew where you would be, huh?
I guess. And she drove us down the road like a herd of cattle. And we got to school, and she said, now you all cannot ride the bus. You've got to keep walking. So we just walked on and come on down here at the store and caught the bus. Went home. I didn't want my daddy to know it.
Did he find out?
Very muchly. My brother was in on it too, but I didn't think he'd say as much to him as he did to me. But anyhow, I went up to the store with him at Clyde one day, and Wallace Yates was there, and he said, everybody called me Sis. And he said, Sis, what did your dad say when he found out about you playing hooky? And there stood Daddy. So he knew.
He'd have found out anyway.
Oh yeah, he'd eventually found out.
So did you get in trouble?
Not bad.
Let's see. What did adults do for fun?
Well, I can remember at one time years ago, the men would gather on Sunday afternoon and go rabbit hunting. There'd be several of them. And they'd come down to Daddy's a lot because we had a lot of woods around. And they'd go out through the pastures and the woods and hunting them. But they got a disease and they had to quit killing them. They was eating them, but after the disease got in them, they quit going.
let's go back and talk about the school. Now, after the school closed, and they started eventually, the community took over the building, taking care of the building. Can you tell me about how you helped with that and the festival over the years and stuff?
I've helped with the festival ever since I remember started it. I don't remember what year that was, back in the 80s.
Why'd y'all do that?
Well, to raise money to try to keep the school going, keep the schoolhouse up. It took a lot of repair, and it took a lot of expense for the insurances and the electric and all. It just took a lot of money, and we try to raise the money to pay it.
And what about what's going on now?
Well, to me, I've lost a lot of interest because it's not going to be the school that I went to. It's not going to look just like it. It's already changed a lot. I'm interested in it being fixed, and I'm proud of what they're doing. But it's just not the same to me.
Right, a little different. What would you like to see them do with that old building?
Well, I'd like to have it to where we could go ahead and have things in it, like our school reunion, which is coming up in September, and have gatherings of different kinds, and go ahead with the festival, and maybe move back in it rather than outside. Yeah, I'd like to see it progress and have something up there.
What are some other memories and stories about Cane Hill you can think of maybe that I haven't asked you about?
In it must have been in about 47. I won't say that to be for sure, but we had a terrible ice storm here. And Alta Robinson had the switchboard down here, and it tore all of the telephone lines out. The whole country back south was on her switchboard, and it broke the poles down, it took the lines down, it done everything. And I know here at the store there was a lot of damage done, and over toward Connor Drossel's house it was just the trees had all fell practically with ice on them. It was a terrible ice storm. And I remember that. We all come to see about it. And we was out of a phone for months. They had to rebuild them completely.
What year was that?
I think it was about 47. I won't say that to be for sure. But it was in that vicinity, 46
What
or
about
so.
the roads in those days?
Oh, they was rough. Yeah, there wasn't any blacktop around here. They was very rough.
How often would you go to Lincoln or Prairie Grove or Fayetteville or Fort Smith? Or?
Not very often. Not very often. We went to Clyde to get the groceries when I was at home. And I don't know, once in a while they'd go to Prairie Grove or Lincoln, but very seldom to Fayetteville.
And other towns not very often either?
No. When I was a teenager, they had dances across from Shaker's store over in the old building where he was upstairs. And it was a very narrow stairway going up there. And there was some windows that would open. And one night, Joanne and me, we'd kind of get around and go once in a while. The parents would let us go once in a while. And one night we was up there, and a couple of families, I'll not call the names, one of them was from the beer joint. They come and they was into it, and we knew both families, and they was fighting. And one of the families, we parked across from Shaker's store along, and you could park in front of Shaker's store too. And one of the families come across and got behind the cars on the opposite side of the store, and the others was on the store porch. And when Shaker would empty pop bottles, he'd set them out in cartons on the front porch. And they got to throwing them pop bottles at these other people and hitting them cars, and our car was down there. But evidently they missed it because we didn't have no broken windows. But we'd stand up there and watch them out the window, and we knew there was only one way for us to get out of there, and that was down that little narrow stairway. And we finally decided, after they kind of calmed down, we decided we was going to get out of there and go home before it started up again. So we did. And then come back another time, and I can't remember really who the people was that was really into it that night, but they got to fighting upstairs. And we couldn't get out. And there was a fellow from Lincoln, Roy J., and he got at the bottom of the stairs, and some of them was upstairs. And as they would push them down them stairs, he'd just knock them a-rolling. And he stopped the fight. And he got us all out of there safe, and we went home. That was the last time Joanne and me ever attended the dance.
What years would that have been in?
Oh, it was in 46 or 7.
How long did the dances go on? How many years did they have?
Oh, not very, probably a year, not very long. Bob Arts had them. He had a little store down below, and then he opened that up for a dance up there. And he had a little band up there. It was pretty nice, I guess, for a little country dance. But Joanne and me didn't get to go very often, but when we did, it seemed like something happened.
What do you remember about the old fountain that was in the middle of the road?
I can remember it well, being there and your cars going around it, you know. But I don't never remember anybody watering their horses or anything there, and they said that was what it was for. But I can remember it being there.
Well, is there anything else you can think of to tell me that I haven't thought to ask? Any story at all you want to share?
Well, no, I can't really think of anything. I think Cane Hill and Clyde was good communities. I liked all the people that was in them, and I think they were good people. And I wish that we could have a lot of it back instead of a lot of the stuff that does go on. But I think Cane Hill and Clyde was blessed with good people.